What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses finds herself face-to-face with daytime television's most outspoken host, and a simple interview question ignites a powder keg of tension that nobody saw coming? Today we're diving into the moment that had viewers across America picking up their phones to call friends. The explosive confrontation between Charlize Theron and Joy Behar that ended with one of the most dramatic walk-offs in daytime TV history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this whole situation to blow up the way it did. The morning started like any other on The View. Panel was settling into their seats. The audience was buzzing with anticipation, and Charlize Theron was scheduled as the main guest to discuss her latest film project. What nobody expected was that within 20 minutes, the entire tone of the show would shift from friendly celebrity chat to something that felt more like a courtroom drama. It began innocently enough. Joy Behar, known for her quick wit and sometimes controversial takes, started with the usual pleasantries. "Charlize, it's wonderful to have you back on the show. You look absolutely stunning, as always." Charlize smiled graciously. "Thank you for having me, Joy. It's always interesting being here." There was something in the way she said interesting that seemed to catch Joy's attention, a slight impetus that suggested there might be more beneath the surface. But Joy pressed forward with her prepared questions about the new movie, the filming process, and working with the director. "So tell us about this character you're playing," Joy continued. "I understand she's quite complex, dealing with some pretty heavy themes around social justice and activism." "She is," Charlize nodded, her posture straightening slightly. "The role really challenged me to think deeply about how we use our platforms, how we speak truth to power, and what happens when people in positions of influence choose to stay silent when they should be speaking up." The other hosts exchanged glances. There was an undercurrent in Charlize's words that seemed directed, purposeful. Joy, never one to back down from potential controversy, leaned forward. "That's fascinating, and I imagine, as someone who's been in this industry for decades, you've seen plenty of situations where people chose silence over speaking out." Charlize's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I have, and I've also seen situations where people speak without thinking, where they use their platform irresponsibly, spreading misinformation or making light of serious issues just to get a reaction." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. The audience sensed something was brewing, that this wasn't going to be your typical celebrity interview. Joy's smile became a bit more forced. "Well, I think most of us try to use our platforms responsibly," Joy responded, her voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. "Though I suppose we all have different definitions of what responsible means." "True," Charlize replied coolly. "Some people think being responsible means always taking the safe route, never challenging anything, never asking the hard questions. Others think it means actually doing the research before you open your mouth." The camera operators were now focusing more intently on both women, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Joy's co-hosts were looking between her and Charlize with growing concern. "Are you suggesting that some of us don't do our research?" Joy asked, her voice rising slightly. Charlize tilted her head, maintaining perfect composure. "I'm not suggesting anything, Joy. I'm stating that in an era where misinformation spreads faster than facts, people with platforms have a responsibility to be accurate, not just loud." "Loud?" Joy's eyebrows shot up. "Are you calling me loud?" "I'm calling out a pattern I've observed," Charlize said evenly, "where opinion gets presented as fact, where complex issues get reduced to sound bites, where the goal seems to be generating heat rather than light." The audience was dead silent now. This had moved far beyond typical daytime television banter. Joy's face was flushing red, and her co-hosts were looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I think you might be confusing passion with irresponsibility," Joy shot back. "Some of us aren't afraid to take a stand, even when it's unpopular." Charlize leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "And some of us confuse taking a stand with taking up space. There's a difference between being passionate and being performative." Joy, the word performative, hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's mouth opened and closed for a moment, clearly taken aback by the directness of the comment. The other hosts were now actively trying to figure out how to intervene without making things worse. "Performative," Joy finally managed. "I've been fighting for progressive causes since before you were even acting." "Fighting for them, or fighting about them?" Charlize asked quietly, "Because from where I sit, it looks like you spend more time arguing with people who might actually agree with you than you do focusing on the real problems." Joy stood up slightly in her chair, her voice getting louder. "How dare you come on this show and lecture me about fighting for causes? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for my beliefs?" Charlize remained perfectly calm, which seemed to make Joy even more agitated. "I'm not questioning your sacrifices, Joy. I'm questioning your methods. When you turn every discussion into a shouting match, when you dismiss anyone who doesn't agree with you completely as an enemy, you're not building bridges, you're burning them. Maybe some bridges deserve to be burned." Joy snapped back. Maybe. Some positions are so wrong that they don't deserve respect or consideration. And who gets to decide that? Charlize asked, her voice still controlled but with an edge of steel. You based on what authority? Based on what expertise beyond your ability to talk over people? The studio had become so quiet, you could hear the cameras humming. Joy's face was now visibly red, and she was gripping the edge of the table. Talk over people. Joy's voice cracked slightly as she repeated the words. I give people a platform to speak. I ask the questions that other people are afraid to ask. Charlize's expression didn't change, but there was something almost pitying in her eyes. Now do you though? Or do you ask leading questions designed to get the answers you want to hear? There's a difference between journalism and entertainment. Joy. Entertainment. Joy stood up fully now, her chair rolling back slightly. You think what I do is just entertainment. I think what you do is create content. Charlize replied matter-of-factly, whether that content informs or educates or actually helps anyone is debatable. Whoopi Goldberg finally tried to intervene. Ladies, maybe we should take a step back here and ... No. Joy cut her off sharply, never taking her eyes off Charlize. I want to hear this. I want to hear how someone who makes millions playing pretend for a living thinks she can lecture me about substance. Charlize's composure finally showed the first crack, a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. Playing pretend. Is that what you think acting is? Isn't it? Joy shot back. You memorize lines someone else wrote, you pretend to be someone else for a few months, and then you collect your paycheck and move on to the next role. At least I deal with real issues affecting real people every single day. Real issues. Charlize's voice dropped to almost a whisper, which somehow made it more menacing than if she had shouted. You mean like the time you spent 15 minutes mocking climate activists while completely misrepresenting the science? Or when you dismissed concerns about media bias by saying people should just get over it? Joy's mouth fell open. I never said that. You absolutely did. Charlize continued, her voice gaining strength. 3 weeks ago, you called environmental protesters professional complainers and suggested that people worried about media representation were being overly sensitive. I watched it myself. That's not what I meant, Joy stammered, clearly caught off guard. But it's what you said, Charlize pressed on. And that's the problem, isn't it? You say things without thinking about the impact, without considering that your words carry weight, that people actually listen to you and take what you say seriously. The other hosts were now actively trying to signal the producers to cut to commercial, but Joy was having none of it. Don't you dare try to make me the villain here. At least I'm honest about my opinions. At least I don't hide behind some fake persona. Fake persona. Charlize laughed, but there was no humor in it. Joy, you've built an entire career on being the tell it like it is person. But the truth is, you only tell it like you see it, and your vision is incredibly narrow. My vision is narrow. Joy's voice was getting shrill now. I've been fighting for women's rights, for minorities, for the working class since you were still worried about getting your next headshot taken. Fighting for them by talking about them, Charlize corrected. There's a difference between advocacy and commentary. When was the last time you actually did something beyond sitting at this table and giving your opinion? The question hit like a physical blow. Joy's face went from red to pale and back to red again. How dare you question my commitment to these causes? I'm not questioning your commitment, Charlize said, her voice eerily calm again. I'm questioning your methods. I'm questioning whether you actually care about solving problems or if you just enjoy being angry about them. That's ridiculous. Joy sputtered. Is it because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've made a career out of manufactured outrage? You take complex issues, reduce them to talking points, and then act surprised when nothing actually changes. Sunny Hunt finally managed to jump in. Charlize, I think maybe we're getting a bit off track here. Charlize turned to look at Sunny, and for a moment, her expression softened. Are we though? Because this is exactly the kind of conversation we should be having. Instead of just nodding along and pretending everything is fine, maybe we should actually examine what we're doing here. What we're doing here, Joy interjected, her voice shaking with anger, is trying to have a civilized conversation, which apparently you're incapable of. Charlize turned back to Joy, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Civilized. You want to talk about civilized? Let's talk about the time you interrupted a domestic violence survivor mid-sentence because you disagreed with her political affiliation. Let's talk about how you've made guests feel unwelcome and attacked simply because they didn't share your exact worldview. Joy's hands were trembling now. That never happened. It happened, Charlize said firmly, multiple times, and the fact that you don't even remember shows exactly how little you think about the impact of your behavior on other people. You're lying, Joy said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm not lying, Joy. I'm just not willing to pretend anymore that what happens on this show is always okay just because it gets ratings. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy was staring at Charlize with a mixture of rage and something that might have been recognition. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. You know what? Joy finally said, her voice barely controlled. Maybe you should stick to your movie sets where everyone has to pretend you're wonderful because you're the star. This is the real world, where real people deal with real consequences. Charlize stood up slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. You're absolutely right, Joy. This is the real world. And in the real world, when someone consistently behaves inappropriately, eventually someone calls them out on it. Asterisk, Joy shot up from her chair so fast it rolled backward into the wall behind her, called out, "You think you're calling me out? You come on my show, you sit at my table, and you think you can judge me, your show." Charlize raised an eyebrow, still standing calmly. Last I checked, this was The View, not the Joy Behar show, but maybe that's part of the problem. You've forgotten that this is supposed to be a conversation, not a monologue. The other hosts were frantically gesturing to the control room, but the cameras kept rolling. This was television gold, and everyone knew it. "Don't you lecture me about conversation," Joy spat. "I've been having conversations on television since before you knew what a camera was." "Having conversations or dominating them?" Charlize asked quietly, "because there's a difference between talking with people and talking at them." Joy's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "You privileged little princess. You have no idea what it's like to fight for anything real. You live in your Hollywood bubble, surrounded by people who tell you how amazing you are, and you think that gives you the right to come here and judge the rest of us." Charlize's jaw tightened, and for the first time, real anger flashed across her face. "Privileged princess. You want to talk about privilege, Joy? You've been sitting at this table for years, using your platform to tear down other women, to create division instead of unity, and you call me privileged? I create division." Joy's voice was reaching a pitch that made the sound engineers wince. "I'm fighting for progress while you're worried about your image and your brand deals." "My brand deals?" Charlize laughed, but it was a cold sound. "Joy, I've donated more money to actual causes in the past year than you've probably made in the past 5, but unlike you, I don't need to announce it every time I write a check." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Joy's face went through several color changes as she processed what Charlize had just implied. "Are you saying I only care about money?" Joy's voice was dangerously quiet now. "I'm saying you care about being seen." Charlize replied, "There's a difference between doing good work and performing good work for an audience." Sarah N. tried desperately to redirect. "Maybe we could talk about the actual movie, .. "No," Joy cut her off without looking away from Charlize. "I want to finish this conversation. You think I'm performative? You think I don't care about real issues? Let me tell you something, you self-righteous, sanctimonious." "Careful, Joy," Charlize interrupted, her voice deadly calm. "The cameras are still rolling." "I don't care about the cameras," Joy screamed, completely losing control now. "Wait, sit there in your designer clothes, with your perfect life, and you judge people who actually get their hands dirty, fighting for change. Get their hands dirty." Charlize's voice was incredulous. "Joy, you sit behind this desk and yell at people. That's not getting your hands dirty, that's getting your voice hoarse." "At least I use my voice for something other than reading lines," someone else wrote. Charlize went very still. The insult was clear, and everyone in the studio felt the shift. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. "You know what, Joy, you're absolutely right. I do read lines that other people wrote, but at least when I do it, I understand what I'm saying. I don't just open my mouth and let whatever falls out become someone else's problem." Joy stepped around the table, moving closer to Charlize. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Charlize said, not backing down an inch, "that you've spent so many years talking without thinking that you've forgotten how to listen. You've forgotten how to learn. You've forgotten that sometimes the best thing you can do is admit, you don't know everything. I don't know everything." Joy was almost shrieking now. "You think you know more than me about politics, about social issues, about fighting for what's right. I think I know more about knowing when to stop talking," Charlize replied quietly. The comment was devastating in its simplicity. Joy stood there, mouth open, clearly struggling to find a response that wouldn't prove Charlize's point. "Get out," Joy finally whispered. "Excuse me," Charlize asked. "I said get out," Joy repeated. Louder this time. "Get off my show. Get away from my table. I don't have to listen to this from some Hollywood actress who thinks she's better than everyone else." Charlize looked around the table at the other hosts, who were staring in shock. She looked out at the audience, who were hanging on every word. Then she looked back at Joy, who was breathing heavily and glaring at her with undisguised hatred. "You're right," Charlize said finally. "You don't have to listen to this. But maybe you should want to." She reached down and unclipped her microphone with calm, practiced movements. "Thank you for having me, ladies. This has been very illuminating." Joy was still standing there, shaking with rage. "Don't you dare walk away from me when I'm talking to you." Charlize paused, microphone in hand, and looked back at Joy with something that might have been pity. "Joy, that's exactly the problem. You're always talking, but you never say anything worth hearing." The words hit Joy like a physical slap. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. For perhaps the first time in her television career, Joy Behar was actually speechless. Charlize turned and began walking toward the exit, her heels clicking against the studio floor in the absolute silence. Each step seemed to echo like a gunshot in the stunned quiet of the studio. "Don't you walk away from me," Joy finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate shout, rather than the commanding tone she was clearly going for. "We're not finished here." Charlize stopped but didn't turn around. "Actually, Joy, we've been finished for a long time. You just never realized it." "What is that supposed to mean?" Joy demanded, taking a few steps after her. Now Charlize did turn around, and the look on her face was almost serene. "It means that this conversation, this entire dynamic you've created here, represents everything that's wrong with public discourse today. You don't actually want to discuss anything, Joy. You want to perform outrage for an audience." "That's not true," Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Charlize asked. "Think about it. When was the last time you changed your mind about anything because of something someone said on this show? When was the last time you admitted you were wrong? When was the last time you learned something new instead of just confirming what you already believed?" Joy stood there, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water. The questions were clearly hitting home in a way that her anger couldn't deflect. Whoopi tried again to salvage the situation. "Charlize, I think we all get passionate about things we care about." Charlize nodded, respectfully, toward Whoopi. "Passion is wonderful, Whoopi, but passion without wisdom is just noise. And noise doesn't solve problems, it just creates more of them." She looked back at Joy, who was still standing in the middle of the set, looking lost. "Joy, you have a platform that millions of people see every day. You have an opportunity to actually make a difference. But instead of using that power responsibly, you use it to score points, to win arguments that don't have winners or losers." "I do make a difference," Joy said weakly. "Do you?" Charlize asked gently. "Or do you just make noise?" "Because I've been watching this show for years, and I've seen you take important issues and turn them into entertainment. I've seen you take complex problems and reduce them to bumper sticker slogans. I've seen you treat serious topics like they're games to be won rather than challenges to be solved." The camera was capturing every word, every expression, every moment of this extraordinary breakdown of typical television conventions. Joy looked around desperately, as if seeking support from her co-hosts, but they were all staring at the floor or at their hands. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Joy said finally, her voice small. "You don't understand what it's like to have an opinion about everything, to always have to be on, to always have to be ready with a response." For a moment, Charlize's expression softened. "You're right, I don't understand that pressure. But Joy, nobody is forcing you to have an opinion about everything. Nobody is making you respond to every issue with the same level of intensity. You could choose to say, 'I don't know,' sometimes. You could choose to listen more and talk less." "That's not who I am," Joy whispered. "No," Charlize agreed, sadly, "it's who you've become. But it doesn't have to be who you stay." She turned toward the exit again, then paused one more time. "Joy, you asked me what I think I know about fighting for what's right. Here's what I know. Real change doesn't happen in television studios. It happens in communities, in voting booths, in quiet conversations between people who disagree but still respect each other enough to listen. It happens when people stop performing their beliefs and start living them." Joy was crying now, tears of rage and frustration streaming down her face. "You think you're so much better than me." Charlize shook her head. "I don't think I'm better than you, Joy. I think I'm different from you. And I think maybe that difference is what you can't handle." She walked to the exit, then turned back one final time. "Ladies, thank you for having me. Joy, I hope someday you figure out that being right isn't the same thing as being helpful." And with that, Charlize Theron walked off the view set, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence, a co-host in tears, and an audience that had just witnessed something they would never forget. The cameras kept rolling for another 30 seconds, capturing Joy standing alone in the middle of the set, mascara running down her cheeks, her co-hosts afraid to move or speak. Finally, Whoopi cleared her throat and said quietly, "We'll be right back after this commercial break." But everyone watching knew that some things can't be fixed with a commercial break. Some moments change everything, and this was one of them. The confrontation between Charlize Theron and Joy Behar had started as a simple interview and ended as a masterclass in the difference between having a platform and knowing how to use it responsibly. What made this walk-off so powerful wasn't just the drama of the moment. It was the way Charlize had remained calm and controlled throughout the entire exchange, never raising her voice, never losing her temper, but systematically dismantling Joy's arguments with surgical precision. She had turned what should have been a simple promotional interview into a profound examination of media, responsibility, and public discourse. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Joy, red-faced and screaming, representing everything chaotic and destructive about modern media, and Charlize, composed and thoughtful, representing what public conversation could be if people approached it with intention rather than ego. As the credits rolled and the audience filed out in stunned silence, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a celebrity walk-off. It was a watershed moment that perfectly captured the tension between entertainment and enlightenment that defines so much of our media landscape today. So what do you think really caused this confrontation to explode the way it did? Was Charlize right to call out Joy's approach, or did she cross a line? Subscribe for more incredible stories like this one, and let me know in the comments what you think was the real breaking point that led to this unforgettable television moment.